This book was lauded as a beautiful, funny, and sometimes sob-making story of quiet transformation, a crackling page-turner filled with characters you can't help but root for, and the best kids' book of the year of 2012. And I really couldn't stand it. Hey everybody, it's Anna. Welcome back to my BookTube channel. Today I am going to be talking about the novel Wonder by R.J. Palacio. This is a sort of middle grade, maybe like younger end of YA novel that came out in 2012. This is a story about a young boy called Augie. He is in 5th grade and he has some type of facial disfigurement. It's not like exactly specified what it is in the book, but I believe the author has indicated that it could be analogous to like Treacher Collins syndrome. But regardless, he has a facial disfigurement and he is also deaf, and because of all of his like medical complexities, he has never been to a like school with other kids before. He's always homeschooled because he has been in and out of surgeries and stuff. So this book actually chronicles him starting at a middle school for the first time, going through a lot of typical middle school kid things like making friends and trying to do well in his classes. And that all seems like it should be pretty straightforward. I'll admit that I was a little bit nervous about like potential ableism because this is written by a non-disabled author. Going in, and what I found was actually a little bit more complicated than that. So I'm going to start off by saying that this book does something that I really don't like very much at all in books for anyone. And this is a book that takes a story that is about bullying and makes the answer to the bullying just be kind to everybody, sort of an amorphous but ultimately very spineless moral about kindness being the most important thing, which I think is one of those sort of comfortable sentiments that sometimes adults want to pass on to children because it makes the adults feel better. And I guess because the adults think it will make the bullying stop. It could, that's a possibility, but just telling kids to be kind on the face of it honestly just comes across as very disingenuous to me, because number one, does that message reach the kids that are doing the bullying? Number two, does that actually help the kid who is being bullied kind of get on with the rest of their day and solve anything? And three, does it have any impact on the bystanders at all, whether those are adults or other children? So that was one of the things that really rubbed me the wrong way about this book. The other thing is that a lot of this book's bullying plotline focuses very much on the fact that Augie gets made fun of a lot for his disability. Because people are often shocked by his physical appearance, and because kids, just like anybody else of any age, can be really cruel and mean and teasing when it comes to difference and things that they don't understand, the disability part of it is a big part of the reason why he is singled out for being bullied in the first place. This book, I think, doesn't ever really truly interrogate the disability aspect of it. The book goes to constant lengths through multiple sets of characters to reassure us that Augie isn't disabled, isn't special needs, isn't, really different from anybody else in any meaningful way. And funnily enough, the only character that really does sort of see it that way is Augie. I know that this might be the kind of critique that you could say, well, this is just something that the characters believe, but not the author. The fact of the matter is, though, the voices of all of the characters, like this book is told from multiple points of view, the voices of all of the different characters kind of all meld together into one, and it really does come across as the author, like, very much trying to impart this heavy-handed message. Not necessarily that we should not make fun of people who are disabled because that's ableist, but that we shouldn't make fun of Augie because he is not disabled, or he is less disabled, or he is just like everybody else. This book did have a pretty powerful opportunity, I think, to tell a story about ableism, But it can't really do that because the book is too afraid to use the word disability and have like an honest confrontation with the social dynamics at play surrounding disability. Interestingly enough, one of the sort of disability plot points of the book centers around the fact that Augie is old enough that his hearing loss progresses to the point where he starts to use hearing aids. He says that he is, I think at one point he uses the word deaf, or that he needs to use hearing aids or something like that. I know some deaf people considered their deafness to be a disability, some do not. That kind of varies across the community. And there is like deaf identity, deaf culture that exists alongside and like frequently in conversation and complementary with disability identity. That is not explored at all in this book. When Augie has like this very visible facial difference that everyone insists is not a disability, even though I would argue that it is, something that is visible in terms of like his hearing aids, like his deafness, is also never treated as a disability either, despite the fact that one of the things that the bullies do is steal his hearing aids when he's getting like beat up by other kids. So I think that was really just a missed opportunity of a book. I think this was also just kind of weird in the sense that I'm not really sure who this story is for, right? I don't think that this book is necessarily written for kids. It reads a lot more like a book that's trying to make adults feel better about themselves. And I know that this book is like assigned reading in a lot of different school classrooms. I was unfortunately not able to find any like reviews that were very obviously from children, probably because I was looking on websites like Goodreads, and I don't think that like young kids are hanging out on Goodreads or anything like that. But yeah, this book, I'm not really sure who it's for, right? The narrative voice of the book, despite it being told from multiple points of view, sounds very samey across ages, gender, life experience. We hear from Augie, we hear from his older sister, we hear from one of his friends, we hear from his older sister's boyfriend, his older sister's former best friend, and it really just seems like there are too many competing points of view trying to play around with ideas that then wind up coming out very half-baked. So I thought that was unfortunate. I also really don't think that this is a book that's written for disabled readers. In that sense, maybe I do think that like the one use case I could think of for this book is inspiration porn. That certainly seems to be the reaction a lot of people had to it, and I think this reading is confirmed by the ending of the book. So if you're not familiar with the term, inspiration porn was coined by disabled Australian activist Stella Young, which is basically the sort of trope that exists in media of calling a disabled person inspiring for doing something very ordinary that would just be considered unremarkable if a non-disabled person did it. So basically saying to somebody, for instance, who's in a wheelchair, oh, good for you for getting out of the house this morning, or something like that. Or a picture of somebody who's like an amputee doing a wild and crazy like bench press with the caption, the only disability is a bad attitude, like that sort of thing, which is designed to make the presumably like non-disabled viewer or like consumer of that trope feel better about themselves and feel inspired. So where I think this book like supports that reading, that it was actually intended as such, is because Augie literally wins an award at the end of the book for being the most courageous student. I would argue he doesn't really do anything exceptionally courageous throughout this book, beyond just the fact that it does take a lot of chutzpah to like exist as a disabled person in the world. He pretty much just goes to school and has to deal with things that a lot of the other kids wind up dealing with. Even Augie at the end says that he compares like his award that he wins to the scene at the end of Star Wars A New Hope, where everybody who is involved in like blowing up the Death Star gets medals. And he even says, I didn't blow up the Death Star. I really just managed to survive the 5th grade, but the medal felt pretty good. And he gets this medal for being particularly courageous. It's like an achievement award that the school gives out. And I know that stuff like that happens in real life, but in a book whose message is we need to be kind to others, that is also like really undercut by the we need to show the disabled kid how brave he is just for simply existing. This also winds up, unfortunately, like not resolving the bullying plot much in any way, shape, or form, because whenever he goes to receive the award on the stage at the end of the school year, basically everyone is clapping and cheering and there isn't a dry eye in the house. And all of the kids who I would consider to be more of the bystanders, or the ones that are like the bully's henchmen, I suppose, all instantly become nice to him. And the one kid who is the bully is like not only left completely unredeemed by the end of the book, he just doesn't even show up again at any point throughout the book. You hear about him one time and that's it. I don't really like when adults write stories for children that feature bullying that do stuff like that, because very rarely do bullying situations tie up perfectly and nicely with a bow. I personally am not aware of any bullying situation that ends like Star Wars A New Hope, where people are clapping and cheering for the kid that one time they bullied while he walks across the stage to get the medal. But hey, if that's been your experience. So on the one hand, I can see why this book is wildly popular. There's a lot of ableist tropes that still exist in media. It is ostensibly written with a good message for children about the importance of kindness and not bullying. And it has like the type of feel-good message that is ultimately very easy for both adults to endorse and feel good about themselves, and for children to just basically be able to get on with. Unfortunately, I found that it was too like saccharine and overly sentimental. I don't think it really takes the concerns of kids this age very seriously. And I also can't get over some of the benevolent ableism, but ableism nonetheless, that exists within, I believe, the author's worldview writing this book. There is some additional context for this, that she said that she was inspired to write this story because her child had a negative reaction to seeing a young kid with a facial difference at an ice cream store. That's interesting to me because, and this is, not a monolithic statement, but a lot of times when I've spoken to other people who are disabled and when I have been using like a mobility aid in public or something like that, which I sometimes do when I need to use one, I do, having conversations with kids in public is usually one of the least insensitive ways someone is going to react to you being visibly or obviously disabled in public. Granted, this could be very different with it being like a peer-to-peer situation here, and I don't know any more details than that of how this situation was handled. But I think we, on the whole, need to give kids a little bit more credit when it comes to asking questions about disability and things like that without having to necessarily pile on a bunch of additional cultural baggage that comes with that. Granted, this book is also 14 years old at this point, and I haven't read any of the author's other books. Perhaps this is something that changes or is explored further on, but given that this is by far her most popular book, it's the one assigned in schools, and it's the one that got made into a movie, that's why I'm kind of bringing up the outsized impact that this book could possibly have. I don't think that she was setting out to write this book with ableist intentions, but that is really how it comes across to me. I would also recommend that you go read the review written by Michaela Moody, who is herself a disabled woman with facial difference, and she writes a really great review of this book, particularly from the disability perspective of it. Again, I think That and the fact that kindness is the magic bullet that destroys all obstacles in our way are my main issues with this book, and it's why I'm not going to recommend it. I know that makes it seem like I might be a bit of a sourpuss compared to the glowing reviews that you find on Goodreads, but I did not like this book, and I don't think it's necessarily worth your time or the time of the young people in your life. So if you get assigned to read this for school, sorry, can't help you get out of your book report there, but maybe I have given you a little bit more to think about and chew on when it comes to stuff like how we write these types of stories for children. So if you've read this book, I am interested to hear what you thought of it. And if you haven't, did you watch the movie or have you heard anything else about it? I've seen this book everywhere. It was a bestseller when I was a bookseller, and we had like a huge table of it up in the front, and finally got around to reading it just to see like what all the fuss was about 14 years later. So leave your thoughts or your comments down in the comment section below. As always, thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.